Good afternoon. Just checking volume levels. Okay, if we start and try not to compete too much with the noise behind us, I'd like to welcome everybody to the session this afternoon. My name is Martin Baker, and I'm from the Corporate Learning Consortium. And we wanted to try something a little bit different. As an organisation, we're about a customer base, a community base, about sharing information. We look at ourselves within our customer base very much as thought sharers as opposed to thought leaders. But we work with them. We have a lot of partners who are considered thought leaders, i.e. the group today. And what we wanted to do was, come out to you as an audience within our industry and find out some of those big issues that you're running into, some of those big challenges, and then put them to a level of a board of experts, if you like. You may have noticed over the last 3 or 4 days we've been putting some questions out there into the web world and using Twitter and using all sorts of different types of technology to find out, what are those burning questions that you want to ask, and then we've put them in a list, and then we've asked people to come back to us and say, okay, well, these are the key questions that we want you to answer. On our panel at the end, we have John McGurk from the CIPD, Laura Overton from Towards Maturity, Peter Casebow from GoodPractice, and Steve Rayson from Kineo, City and Guilds. Okay. Okay, so we've got a panel of people here who they all create leading surveys throughout the year, and I'm sure that most of you are familiar with some of them, with one of them, with all of them, and. What the question that came out top was, okay, we've got all of these surveys. If I've only got time to read one, which is the one that I would read? What we've actually done is we've put together a document or report, whatever you want to call it. Is everybody familiar with the concept of York Notes when we were at school? A 300-page book condensed into 15 pages that you'd read the night before. Well, what we've done is we've created, if you like, the York Notes version of all of these different types of reports, and it's a couple of pages, and it shows you what it covers, who it's aimed at, the audience that have participated within that, and then some key factors that appear from that particular report. And if anybody would like to see that, then we've set up. I don't know whether everybody can read that at the bottom. Does everybody have a mobile phone? If you text to 82055, CLC space, and then your email address, and then that will generate a copy of the report that will come out to you. And this is on every slide, so you don't need to do it immediately. What I'm going to do, I'm going to kick off. I'm going to ask Steve. You got 60 seconds. Can you just give a very quick overview of what your report covers and who it's aimed at and why they should read it?
Can you hear me all right?
You're making switch phone.
Okay, people can hear me, right? So I'll kick off. We run an annual research report with eLearning Age, which gets published every November. It's a qualitative report. It's not a lot of quantitative data in it. We interview 30 heads of HR or training directors about the issues that are facing them and the trends that they see in the industry. And so it's headed up last year, 10 trends from leading companies. It was downloaded about 30,000 times on the internet, so if you want to read it. If you don't have time to read, we've also done a 2-minute overview on YouTube, so you can just pick it up on YouTube.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Peter.
Hello there. Our survey that we've... hopefully that won't happen again. Our survey is the Learning Trends Survey, and it's interested in what are the trends for, particularly in learning and development. So we're looking at what impact learning and development are having, and what they're trying to do, and what the drivers are that's driving the learning they're trying to deliver. So it's a trend piece, and we're trying to build that over time. So we've now done 6 of those. The 7th one will be coming out early next year. So it's really aimed at trying to create that piece for a trend piece, a long-term piece for learning and development, and fit in with all the other surveys that are around.
Thank you, Peter. Laura.
Our survey is different because it's not a survey. I think one of the key things that we've wanted to do over the last 10 years when we've been looking at the work we've been doing is what does good look like? So really the work that we do in research is to identify what organisations are really delivering the best results that they can with their learning technologies, and more importantly, how are they doing that, so that it creates an opportunity for people to have a benchmark, so that when you download the work that we've done, you get evidence that you can use internally to build your own business case, and also help your journey internally as well. So our survey is different because it's not one.
Thank you, Laura. John.
Okay, thanks, Laura. I run the Learning and Talent Development Survey, soon to drop the T, the talent, not because it's not about talent, but because it confuses people that are in talent and resourcing. Because CIPD run a lot of surveys. Why should you look at our survey? It represents the views of a significant cohort, about 40,000 CIPD members who are L&D specialists. It covers the waterfront of L&D. It's calling turns constantly in everything from coaching to cognitive science. We're cajoling and capturing curiosity. You see a lot of alliteration here, I love it. But basically, we are getting people curious about the new trends in L&D like big data, etc. We're tracking policy impact, looking at stuff like apprenticeships, the use of union learning reps, that kind of thing. And this year's, we're ranking and rating learning interventions so that we know, for example, that e-learning is seen as least effective of many methods, sadly, for many that run e-learning programs, and we're benchmarking and measuring practice and looking at the economic impact on L&D. So I think we're covering a lot. But I would like to say the other surveys are very complementary to what we do, and there's room for everybody to have their different perspective.
Thank you, John. Right, move on to the first question. I'll read it out to the panel because you can't see that. Why do we need Tin Can? How does it differ from SCORM? What value does it add? Does it mean we no longer need an LMS?
Is that one question?
That one question. I think, Steve, you're probably in the best place to answer that, kicking off with why do we need Tin Can?
Okay, I have a question of why we need Tin Can. I do think there's issues about SCORM because it's a very old standard, which is not the most robust to track for the first thing, because you need an open session, and a number of those fail and don't get tracked in LMSs. I think the really nice thing about it is it's more flexible than SCORM. SCORM you can track started, finished, score, whether you passed. You can track a lot more in Tin Can, so you can decide what you want to track, what's important for you as a business. You can decide on that and you can track it. I don't think it means the LMS is dead, and we can come on to that, but it is a lot more flexible and robust than we have within SCORM, and it means you can then hold your learning outside of an LMS and still track it and use the Tin Can standard to pass data back to a central learning record store.
Brilliant, thank you. Does anybody else want to add anything? Okay.
Just that what I would say is, because I cover the waterfront in L&D, and so do a lot of professionals who have got L&D roles, don't be embarrassed if there is something that comes up and you don't know what it is. I don't really know what Tin Can is. I've been sent lots of tweets introducing me to it. I don't have unlimited time, but it's a great opportunity for me and you, if you don't know about it, to learn about it here.
Okay, thank you. What we're going to do is we're going to take all of the questions and put them into, using technology, effectively put them into a blog post. And so I think in total we've probably had about 100 questions that people have been asking us. So we'll put them in a blog post, and then we might invite people in the audience, people within our community, to start putting their answer to that, and certainly the panel today. Again, if you just text. I feel like I'm on children in need. Yeah. Text CLC space your email address to 82055, and then we could send you information that relates to that as well, so you can take part. Okay, are there any questions from the audience? So between questions, if there's any burning questions that you'd like to direct to any member of the panel, then now is the time to do it. Can I see just a hand in the air, and we can then pass you a mic if you have anything you'd like to ask. If not, we'll move on because we have plenty of questions. I need to demonstrate return on investment on my mobile learning strategy. What benchmarks should be in my proof of concept document? Peter, can I?
At the risk of offending whoever asked the question if they're here, I think it's the wrong question. I think if you're thinking about a mobile learning strategy, you're starting absolutely the wrong place. The question should surely be about what am I trying to achieve, what performance change am I trying to achieve, and if mobile happens to be the right way of delivering it, then you would go and look at that. But then your return on investment is around the performance change you're trying to deliver. And mobile is just your way of delivering it. So having a mobile learning strategy to me just not make sense. Where you would have an iPad strategy, you're going to have an LMS strategy. I think it's the wrong question.
Steve, you look like you want to add something.
I want to come in because I'm probably a bit contrary. I really hate the term mobile learning. And I think it's because it was invented by vendors to sell something new and sexy to customers. And it's got so much traction now that we all have to talk about it. But, I mean, I don't know about you, but I use a laptop up on the train to come up. I answer emails on my phone. I have an iPad, a mini iPad, which is fantastic if you haven't got one. They fit in your pocket and they're great. And to me, it's about we've got to deliver learning to multiple devices. It's about multi-device delivery. It's not just about mobile delivery, which is a bit confusing, really. So, but I agree with Peter. What's the business imperative you're trying to solve? What's the strategy for that? Not a strategy for mobile, but mobile doesn't make sense to me. It's about multi-device delivery.
Laura.
Key things that you need to think through when you're looking at any kind of technology. Again, I concur about having an idea with your business leaders. What are we trying to achieve here? And if you're not measuring that with your classroom training, and if you're not measuring that with your current e-learning, and if you're not measuring that kind of impact with your current initiatives, then it's going to be very difficult for you to find a benchmark against the impact of any new technology. So I would suggest that we shouldn't be thinking about measuring return on investment on a technology, but actually starting to think through where are we now before we implement, and then how can we connect back through with those statistics once we've actually done the program itself. And the other voice I would add to making a justification to your mobile strategy, or to be looking at doing things differently, is actually the voice of the workers within your organisation. And picking up on what Steve has just been saying, what is it that they are currently doing? How are they currently using their devices? What are they currently finding useful that perhaps you're not even touching on at the moment? That's one of the things that we're finding out with our new learning landscape audit, is that there's so much interest that people are doing stuff for themselves that we don't even know about. If we can capture that as a starting point for our business justification for change, then we may have a much louder voice than perhaps having a return on investment strategy.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, a slight evidence-based sort of, reminder for people. Roughly only about 15% frequently or regularly use mobile learning in their learning interventions, according to our survey. We're in a sample which is largely unrepresentative of the universe of learning situations because we're at a learning technology conference. One thing that I would say is don't get ahead of the organisation by trying to bring in stuff which will be perceived as faddish and then spending a lot of time trying to evaluate and justify that. Just look at the very, the great advice that's come from, other people here, Laura and Peter, about making sure that it's about a business impact or an organisational impact or a change in people's behaviour that's positive for the rest of the organisation.
Thank you. And it's something that we've encountered for years and years. I remember going back 10 years ago when people started talking about an e-learning strategy, and we were saying, it should just be part of the learning strategy. And it's exactly the same with mobile now. It has to be part of that overriding strategy. Okay, another chance for questions from the audience. Anybody want to quiz anybody here in terms of things that you're up to? Question about LMSs, tin can that we've covered already? No, it's okay. It's actually really refreshing to have a question bank here. And it's always the situation where you're standing there wanting the audience to participate and they won't. Okay, can anyone on the panel clearly explain the difference between 70-20-10, informal learning and social learning? Laura, you're smiling as if you want to answer this one.
I think it kind of links in with what you guys have been talking about jargon. I'm sorry, but what we were talking about a moment ago is about having an E-enabled strategy that builds talent, learning and performance within our organisation. That means that we have to look beyond the traditional intervention of a course, whether it's an online course. And I think some of these things, what it's allowed us to do is to open up new conversations, to be able to think differently, because just think the lead speaker in the conference next door was talking about the fact we have to become adaptable, we have to become agile. Accenture brought out an agile HR strategy paper yesterday, and they were saying learning and development, they had to be integrated within the workflow. And I think one of the dangers that we have is that we miss out on that important issue of how do we offer services that get more integrated into the workflow, that help our organisations become more agile, because we're caught up on what is the difference between 70-20-10, informal and social. We should be dropping that and be thinking again about the business need. Sorry, opting out here.
Could I just say, I think that the ratio 70-20-10 could actually be reversed for the consultant revenue that it generates from telling people that that's the way that they should measure learning. I think the concept of informal learning, the concept of social learning, I think one of the key issues that we need to get back to is the fact that quite often, there are what the fancy term would be heuristics, but they're just basically patterns of thinking where we get stuck in and we think that's the way it works. And in fact, they're not. They're indicative. They're meant to simplify the world, not to explain it. So what we should be doing is looking at the overall strategy, how it's supported. I think it's important for us to recognise, for example, the importance of instructional learning, because you can't teach people to drive trains, fly planes, be doctors, etc., without a lot of instruction, whether it takes place in a classroom or not. But the way that some of the debate goes, you'd think that all learning was sort of diffused out there and informal and had no structure to it, which is exactly the wrong kind of approach to take when you're trying to justify the ability to have learning make an impact. So that's just a cautionary note to treat these sort of stactoids with a fairly reflective approach.
Okay.
Yeah,
Steve, just comment
just to
on.
add to that, I mean, I firstly would agree completely with John about there's just so much jargon about you need a social learning strategy, you need a 70-20-10 strategy, a mobile strategy, etc. I mean, learning we've always delivered in a blended economy. It might have been coaching, classroom, workbooks, etc. We've always had mixed delivery methods. So I think we've got to get away from the jargon, look at what we're trying to solve and how do we'll help employees do that. I do think there are some changes. I think some of the things around social learning, the ability of the internet to connect people with other people is quite interesting, and I think there are lots of platforms. I wouldn't say rush out and get a social learning platform, because there are loads of free platforms out there as well. And I personally do use Twitter as a learning network. I try to follow people who I think say interesting things or I can ask questions to, and I use them as a wider network. So I think there is a lot of power in that network, but I think we have to move away from the whole concepts of you have to have a social learning strategy, or please buy my social learning platform. You just use Google Plus if you want a social learning platform.
Because Steve, I believe that you've started using Google Hangouts recently.
I had a Google Hangout the other day, and someone showed me all the effects. But I have to say, I really love Google Plus as a platform. You can create communities, you can tweet on it, you can actually effectively upload videos, etc. And Google Hangouts is just a great, one-to-many video channel, which is fantastic. And someone was showing me the after effects and things that you can do and put hats on people and other silly stuff you can do on Google Hangouts as well. But if you haven't used Google Plus and Google Hangouts, really try. It's a fantastic pro platform, and it's growing really strongly at the moment.
Laura. Sorry, Peter.
No, you go first.
I agree with everything that people have said. The one thing I would just maybe add to that, the whole piece about, let's not get hung up on the labels, is one of the things we did as a piece of research, we went to ask managers not what the most popular form of learning was, but actually what did they do when faced with an unfamiliar challenge. And actually what was really interesting is often what we would think of as learning as professionals, because they go and search on Google. They go and ask colleagues. That's the informal piece that goes on, and you can think about therefore as a strategy, how can I support that? And it doesn't mean to say the formal stuff's not right, but as I say, think about the questions you're asking. Sometimes it's not asking about what's the most effective learning, because people think of learning, they pigeonhole it into something else. But again, back to this performance piece. What do you do when you're faced with an unfamiliar challenge? Suddenly changes people's perceptions, and they'll give you different answers, and it just goes into the mix and gives you a richer perspective on actually what's going to be effective.
Laura.
Just wanted to add one final piece of kind of empirical evidence around this, because the people who are behind some of these strategies, like the frameworks and the thought leaders, have been helping us to shape our benchmark as well. So we take things from both sides, and we have found that those organisations who are embedding these types of approaches into their learning strategy are amongst those at the top performers. So not just those who are delivering instruction, but are supporting, embedding learning, facilitating collaboration. They are getting results which are 5-6 times more in terms of business impact than those that are sticking with a traditional instruction method. So, we need to look at the evidence around this. We can't dismiss things that are really making a difference and saying that actually, it's another fad. We have to look at the evidence of what it delivers.
And if you're not familiar with Towards Maturity and Laura and the work they've been doing, again, within our York Note document, our survey of surveys, then that will send you off to the relevant documentation if you're interested. Okay, how are we doing for time? I know how to deliver learning across my organisation, but I'm not always sure what learning to deliver. How do I better analyse my organisation's needs? John, would you like to comment, please?
Yeah, I think you should start off by looking at the business relevance. We use a sort of very short thinking tool which is free on the CIPD website called RAM, Relevance, Alignment, Measurement. And what you do is you first of all look at how relevant that particular learning intervention that you've been asked to do or that you plan to do is. You look at how it aligns with what the organisation's doing already so that you avoid duplication, etc. You tailor it to right audiences. And you have the end in mind of measuring its impact, which is increasingly important.
Peter.
I think you start by looking at and talking to your organisation about the performance gaps, and actually say what are the performance gaps and where can we make the biggest impact. And it's not always going to be about helping them by delivering learning. It might be about helping them understand what the issues are. If you haven't read Julie Dirkson's book about performance gaps and thinking about it, I would highly recommend it. Designed for how people learn, I think is what it's called. But Julie Dirkson, look it up, it's fabulous. She talks about performance gaps coming from knowledge, from skills, from motivation, from the organisation and the way it's structured, so the environment in the organisation, and from the communication, and actually analysing the performance gap around that. Then you design your learning.
I would just echo that what Peter said, really. You've got to look at the performance gaps. I've always used knowledge, skills and behaviour as the three that you look at. You want to improve knowledge and skills, but fundamentally you need to change behaviour. So what's the performance gap? Are they not selling correctly, not managing things more efficiently, etc.? So what's the behaviour you're looking to change to close that performance gap?
Thank you. Laura.
Just quickly, I would suggest that also it's about having a different kind of conversation with the business that we're working in. And we've just released a report today looking at the evidence of top performers and about alignment and the whole process of how do you become more aligned with the business. And this is part of this, but it's part of a bigger conversation where actually you're identifying together with the business the issues that are needed.
Okay, thank you. Before we go on to this question, any questions from the floor? Any comments?
Can't read, that's a long question.
Okay. The majority view across my workforce is that coaching by line managers, in-house development programs, and almost any other learning tactic is more effective than e-learning. Are all of my co-workers wrong? Wow.
No, they're not, because one of the issues for e-learning is that there's a long tail of bad e-learning out there, which is yet to sort of come out of the system. A lot of compliance learning where people were just basically given experiences which weren't any different from sitting in front of their day job desktop, for example, which were quite dull and uninspired. There's a lot of really good high quality e-learning as well, but a lot of organisations tell us that the level of completion has only gone up to about 25%. Which should at least show us that maybe e-learning isn't hitting the target in the way that it's designed to, and that's probably because of the way in which it was envisaged as a cost-saving measure and not as a performance improvement measure. So I think that would be my take on that, but I think other people will have different views.
That's great. Thanks, John.
I would I would take
Steve.
slightly different tack on that one, as you'd expect, really. But I think look at the evidence. Go back to Laura's thing. Look at the evidence. The American Department of Education did a 12-year study looking at the impacts of technology-enhanced learning. That wasn't pure online learning. It was blended learning approaches. And there's a lot of evidence there that the blended approaches deliver much greater impact in terms of learning than pure classroom and coaching, etc. So there's a link from that from our website, but do look at that. It's a significant report, really. So, and I think the other thing is that it delivers advantages these days that you just can't do. And so a lot of organizations might want to do a lot of classroom. But if you're training 20,000 product people on a new product at Nikon across Europe, in the old days you'd have rolled out classroom training or done other things. You just don't have the time to do that now. You put it on the server tonight, all 20,000 staff do it tomorrow. If you wait 6 months to roll it out, the other products are out. About every 3 months they're refreshing products. So nowadays you just don't have the time. Whether you like it or don't like it, it's cheaper to do it that way, and it's certainly faster to roll out. For some organizations, there just isn't choice, really.
Peter, do you want to add?
I think the only thing I would add to that is, again, slightly different tack in it, but actually thinking about mobile. And again, we put an app out there, top tips for managers. The usage of it, first thing in the morning and last thing at night. These are people who have downloaded it themselves, but we're also seeing in organizations with it. 20 odd minutes in the morning, people going to work, and sort of slightly less time at night, but it's around 9 o'clock at night. So that's people volunteering to go on, and it's nothing particularly fancy. At the moment, we've just updated it, but it used to be just text driven. It was just people were reading things. So people were willing to go on and just on their mobile phone engage and use something. So people are actually willing. There is a lot of evidence of people being willing to use stuff if it's good and make it.
Keep that.
Good, thank you. So I think there's evidence to support that.
I think it's got to be relevant to the individual, and I think one of the pieces of evidence that you shouldn't be listening to all your co-workers, but you should be listening to the staff in your organisation. And as I say, we're in the middle of kind of conducting a series of learning landscape audits at the moment, where we're saying to individuals in the workplace, what is it that you need to do your job? And the top one at the moment is around collaboration and things like that. But coaching was in there, but it wasn't higher or lower than people were using learning technologies. So in the organisations where we've been asked to roll out the landscape, obviously they were doing something right with their technologies because their staff was saying, I really like doing this because of X, Y, and Z. The voice that counts is the voice of your staff. And if your staff are saying, this is what works for me, I want more of it, this is what I'm doing in my own time, why don't you do more of it for me? That's the voice that we should be listening to when we're articulating our business needs.
Brilliant. Thank you. Again, opportunity for questions from the floor. I want at least one question. You can't go home till we've had one question from you. Okay.
You don't know what there's somebody. You nearly missed it there as well.
If you can just say your name, where you're from.
Sure, my name is Owen MacDonald. I work in Kaplan Financial. It's a really simple question. You mentioned the book earlier by Julia Henriksen, which I've read. Julia Dirksen, sorry, of course, it's a great book. I'm just curious if each panel member could recommend just one thing to read.
It's really funny. One of the
blog
questions,
post or a book or whatever. Yeah.
One of the questions, 2 or 3 questions time is, I'm about to go on holiday. Give me a couple of recommendations of books that I should take with me. So let's.
Okay, the one book I always recommend to people is Love is the Killer App. It's a very thin little module. It basically says give away all your knowledge and people will give you back so much more love in return. And it's the approach we've taken at Kineo. Everything we know about e-learning is on our website. You can go there, you can get it, download it. Even our new responsive e-learning authoring tool we're making open source so people can take it, play with it, etc. So Love is the Killer App. Great book.
Peter.
I've already mentioned Julie Dirksen. The one I'm reading just now, which I'm actually quite enjoying, The Chimp Paradox. If you haven't read that, I would recommend that one as well.
Laura.
Okay, the one I've just finished reading, which is always the best one, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
The one I just finished reading is actually, I've been reading Jonathan Kettlebrooke's Seeing Eye to Eye, which it's written in his style, so it's quite entertaining, it's quite challenging. But he really talks some really strong sense about getting into that proper conversation with business. So.
I would say that that most useful for L&D people, I would say, to read in terms of getting new insight would be The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, D-U-H-I-G-G. And if you want to get your head around big data, The Signal and the Noise by Nate Silver, which is a really amazing sort of compendium of insights around using data, if that's something that's a challenge for you.
And again, we'll post the details of these books up on the blog, wherever it's going to go. Just text 82055 CLC space your email address. Do we have time for one more question? And the question from the floor, or should we go straight to? Should we answer this one, or should we move on? Can I have a show of hands? Move on. We've covered mobile already. I've noticed that a lot of companies have taken the E out of the e-learning products and services they offer. Does anyone on today's panel think we should take the learning word out too? Is it a turn off?
Just have E, then would be accused of drug-related offences.
Learning is important, but it's learning for a purpose. It's learning to improve performance in the workplace. But you need learning there. I think in time we will drop the E's, we'll drop the M's, etc. It's all part of learning.
Peter?
Yeah, it's all about performance. So focus on the performance piece.
Yeah.
If you have learning without performance and performance without learning, you have an imbalance. So I think that when people go down the road of saying, let's just have performance, I think they're wrong. And I know that's not what you mean. But learning absolutely contributes to performance and vice versa, and we should always be aware of that.
And I would just echo about the meaning of the word rather than the word. If learning in your organisation means the type of things that John's been talking about, then, and everyone understands that, then we shouldn't drop it. But if learning means old-style way of doing things and a preconceived ideas, then we should drop it like a ton of bricks. And again, it's down to you as an organisation and how the language you need to use in order to facilitate the change that's needed.
Okay, any other comments? We've run over time, so I apologise for running over. I'd like to say a massive thank you for everybody on the panel. And again, to keep in touch, to be able to download any of the things that we've talked about, if you text 82055 CLC space your email address, and then we'll send those out to you. Thank you.